Jules Abbott, welcome to the 40th anniversary video series. That's a mouthful and a half. We'll be posting these videos on our YouTube channel, and you look terrified at the moment.
I am.
But do we have your permission to post them onto that YouTube channel?
Yes, absolutely. Chris.
That's wonderful, thank you. And thank you for agreeing to meet with us today. You are one of the very early members of the Guild. In fact, I suspect that you were the match that ignited the flame that created the Quilters Guild of South Australia. So can you cast your mind back to those early days in the 1983-4s and tell us about where you conceived the idea that maybe we should have a guild, and how you prompted Lane and Rachel to actually put it into motion?
I'll endeavour to, Chris. It was a long time ago, but we'd been living in Houston in Texas. They had started, this was in the late 70s, they had started a guild only a few years before, and so that sort of gave me a bit of an inkling. And then an Australian friend of mine in Houston, who I did my first ever American Patchwork and Quilting, it was called then, class with. She returned to Sydney. We did it at the same time in 1979, and she started the New South Wales, with some others, guild.
Okay.
And she had the first quilting shop in Australia as well, Noni Fisher. So it was in the back of my mind, but arrived back in Adelaide, I was the only, I couldn't find anyone who was interested in patchwork and quilting except some friends who wanted to learn, so I started teaching classes.
Where were you doing that teaching?
I was teaching from home and from my parents. They had a room in the garden from there. And then I was teaching 3 or 4 classes a week.
Was it word of mouth, or?
It was word of mouth, totally word of mouth, and so many people wanted to learn. And then the guild started, and Robin Mesner's shop started, but you know all that.
Yeah.
So I was keen on a guild, but I didn't want to be the head honcho. And so I kept quiet about it. When I met the kindergarten teacher at one of our sons' kindies, told me that Rachel Deckman, another mother, was there, and that she quilted. She did patchwork and quilting, and she introduced us, which was great. And and then through the Quantum Leaps exhibition, we met, or perhaps I think I met for the first time, Lane Gardner, Jan Irvine and Beryl Norman.
Mm-hmm.
And so we decided to meet in each other's homes once a month. And we talked about books we had, equipment we had, because you couldn't buy any here, fabrics. I bought a lot from America. And our designs, what we wanted to do. And I kept on thinking of this guild, and I brought it up a few times, but I didn't want to be the head honcho. And so at first it sort of didn't have any impact. And then one night I was amazed. I think Rachel and Elaine said, "We think we'd like to start a guild." So that's how it started.
Mm-hmm.
That's my memory anyway, yeah, which is a long time ago.
Well, you would have to be one of the first South Australian quilters I know that actually attended the early Houston festival. How did that come to be?
That came to be because I heard about it. I was after my first lot of classes in Houston at the Quilt Patch, run by Catherine Anthony, who was Libby Lehman's mother. That's where I learnt American patchwork and quilting. And then when those classes finished, the group of us met in each other's homes, all American women except 90 and me who was Australian. That was fabulous. And they talked about the quilt festival, because they'd been each year since 1974, since it started. And it was started by Kerry Bresenham, who had the other quilt shop in Houston called Town and Country, I think that's what it's called. She and her mother was very involved as well. So, yes, walking into that barn, huge barn of a place, everything was big in Texas. Everything is big in Texas. And this, you know, was not an exception. Just seeing all these quilts, I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. I really did. It was fabulous. And they had a lovely section of antique quilts that were all judged. And in the end I bought one, which won Best of Show, made in 1865, and exquisitely quilted. But all the quilts there were done by hand. There wasn't, you know, there weren't many art quilts. Some of the luminaries back then in Houston in 1979 were starting to come into the, you know, because we didn't have emails or social media or internet or anything, but they did come to Houston because that was becoming quite a hub. Jeff Gutchin, and not that there were many men, but I remember him, he was from California, and Ginny Bayer, Sonia Lee Barrington, who else was there? Well, there were a few others, and Michael James. He, in my memory, was sort of the first one that was a bit contemporary.
Yes, he was.
He used a lot of solids, brilliant. And I see him now coming to the fore again on Instagram. Yeah, but I loved his work. So, yeah, that was the Houston Quilt Festival. It was just fabulous. I don't think they did workshops then, you know, accompanied with it as our Australian Quilt Festivals do, but yeah, it was, and such generous, lovely people, the Americans, and particularly quilters. They were very, I don't know, they're just lovely people.
Okay. So we can segue then into our first two exhibitions here at the Unley Town Hall, because I believe you were involved in those.
Yes, well, it was the steering committee and then the committee of the Guild who decided to have the first quilt exhibition at the Unley Civic Centre, it was called back then. And so there was an exhibition committee formed, quite a big one, headed by Marie Gebhardt. And we all put things in it, and it was a great success. The only problem I heard, the only complaint I heard from someone was that it was far too crowded. But through that exhibition we got a lot more members, you know, and a lot of people from the country. You know, they drove miles to see that, and they loved it. So they all signed up.
Now, you had another role, and I know there's an anecdote or two amongst this. You were the very first treasurer of the Guild, but you didn't come with financial background, did you? Didn't.
I didn't. Yeah. So, luckily, I said I'd be treasurer if Deirdre Scott, who was back there then, why didn't we be co-treasurers? That might be a bit more comforting, or, you know, whatever. And I didn't have a clue how to do the books, so I asked an accountant friend of ours what I do, what columns I roll up and everything, and you know, I get the fees, and so I opened a bank account, the Savings Bank of South Australia in Norwood, and so I was, you know, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and I didn't want to make any errors in this book, a special book, and so I would writing and everything, all the membership, everyone who's paid a membership and the costs. I remember having to pay Lane for tea and biscuits that cost $8.50 and this sort of thing. It was just, it was pathetic really.
And what happened if you made a mistake on a page?
Well, if I made a mistake, I would rip out the page and I'd start again. It took me hours. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And I was always glad when it was did. We did it months and months about, and I was so glad when I could give it to her. And anyway, I told Deirdre, no, look, I had to rip out these pages. And she said, my husband told me that auditors frown on ripped out pages. So that made me feel worse. Anyway, I got a bit more confident with it and we were fine. But yeah, that was my first foray into, and then I did my husband's books and did practice and I was away, but that was, I don't know.
It's good to have these memories, isn't it?
Great, yeah.
What other memories do you have of the early days of the Guild?
I don't know, I think everyone, we were all young, I suppose, you know, in our early 30s and things, and quite enthusiastic, and just got on and did things, you know, worked out in meetings, and I've kept some of the minutes from them. What we need to have a newsletter, and we want to have exhibitions, and we, you know, just, that's right, we were meeting at the Arts Council on South Terrace, and so there was sort of quite a disparate group. There were the arty, crafty types, Embroiderers Guild, and us, and we all sort of worked together really, and I just remember the meetings. I suppose we became too, did I say that before? We became too, there were too many of us for the Crafts Council room, and so we thought about other places, and I thought, we lived in the Methodist Manse, the old Methodist Manse. We bought it from the church. They built a new one up the road, but it was near Gartrell. It was called Gartrell Methodist Church then. So I said, well, look, I'll just go to the minister and ask if we can have our meetings there. So I went along and he was delighted. Didn't have to pay anything, I don't think. And so we used that for meetings, and then later workshops. We did a lot of workshops then, and we had speakers like Margaret Rolfe came and spoke about her, I think, book she'd written on Australian animals and patchwork quilts or something. Sonia Lee Barrington came, gave us talks. So those memories were lovely, really. Yeah, lovely.
I have to say, if it wasn't for the foresight of people like you and Lane and Rachel, we wouldn't have the Guild that we've got today. So on behalf of anyone who has ever joined SA Quilters, Quilters Guild of South Australia in its past life, thank you for your role, and I guess the wonderful memories that I'm sure you'll evoke in some of the people watching this. So thank you very, very much.
Oh, thanks, Chris. Thank you. And thanks, Kathy.
Hello again, everyone. This is a PS to our video with Jules, because after we finished the last video and we were just chatting, Jules happened to mention a whole lot of new information about which we knew nothing, so we decided to do this little PS. So Jules, you mentioned your early teaching here in Adelaide, but in actual fact I believe that you had an interesting experience beyond Adelaide. What can you tell us about your trip north?
Oh, thanks, Chris. I was invited to be a visiting artist up in the APY lands by a friend who did a lot of research over many years and was awarded an OAM for her work with Aboriginal children, and the fact that they are born with a very creative part of their brain. They were a lot more creative, and she endeavoured to make that known within the Aboriginal community, and particularly in the APY lands. And so she invited me up there as a teacher, and this is the book, one of the books she produced, and she did a lot of work up there, and so I was up there for a week. Do you want to hear about that?
Yes, you mentioned a young girl that you worked with. We'd love to hear that story.
Yes, threads and textiles. I had it marked. Oh, well, that's one of the. That's threads and textiles starting points. She's got that, but she also has. What happened was I was in the arts centre there, and one particular day a young girl came along and just sat quietly with me. She hadn't gone to school, but I'd taken up a lot of sequins and beads and colourful fabric. It's there somewhere.
Let's see if I can find it.
Yeah. Here it is. That's it. And except we're not going to, are we? It's upstairs. Anyway, I just sort of showed her what I was doing, and it was Hawaiian oak leaf and cherries. It was that block named Hawaiian oak leaf and cherries, but I'd used a colourful fabric, and suggested that she decorated it with sequins and buttons, and I looked at one point, and she'd done the most beautiful job, and I took a photo of that, and it's upstairs.
I think Kathy took a photo of it, so we'll publish that.
Okay. But that was quite thrilling because she just took to it. She was so creative, and I was amazed, actually. She was only about 12. I did ask if her mother and father wouldn't mind if I took a photo, and they said not at all. And I kept sending her packets of threads and needles and fabric and things. I did that 3 or 4 times but didn't hear.
It's another memory. You also mentioned in our PS chat that you had a couple of other roles on the Guild. You were on the judging panel for a while. Yes,
I was on the judging panel for a few years. That was great, actually. Yes, but it was some years ago now, so I don't remember a lot about it. But
another opportunity to make quilting friends.
Yes, and incredible to see the work and the fabulous things, and to have to narrow it down was a hard task. You know, it really was, because people there's some beautiful work out there. So that was good, and I was on the Teachers Forum for a while that Heather Ford organised, and we had speakers sometimes.
Teachers Forum?
Well, various ones who taught, obviously, patchwork and quilting, went along. We met at a church somewhere at Kernelite Gardens. Perhaps it was Nola Pierce who organised it. I'm not sure, both of them, but perhaps. And we sometimes had speakers, but normally we just shared how we taught. We shared our notes and talked about patterns. If we made patterns, we just talked about what we did, and it was interesting, actually, and how we could improve our teaching.
It was probably very beneficial to those teachers who were less experienced than some of you more experienced ones too.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
And the other thing was that historically the quilting guilds in Australia have collaborated once, I think, every 2 years. It used to be called the Australian Quilting Council, but it's now called Australia. A lot changed over the COVID period, but the states would take it in turns to host it. And when South Australia hosted it, I believe it was down at Glenelg, and you had a significant role there.
Yes, well, I was asked to chair it. It was for a weekend at Glenelg, and it was very interesting to meet the representatives from the other guilds of every state in Australia, and we discussed a lot of relevant things to our guilds at that time. Again, it was a long time ago. Yes, and we stayed down there for a night, I think, overnight, and Gina Burgess and another lovely woman whose name I've forgotten. Someone slept on the floor. I don't think it was me, but it was fun. Yes, and that was memorable.
Now, since our previous talk on the video, we've done a little tour of some of your quilts, and you mentioned that you've been in SALA, South Australian Living Artists. Can you tell us how that came to be and how often you've been a part of SALA?
Yes, well, I've been in SALA twice, and I made 2 quilts that are now framed and hanging on the wall, but inspired by, we had a holiday place down near the Murray Mouth, and it's sort of it inspired me in so many ways with so much of my work, and particularly with these 2, I took a photo and put on fabric, and the flora, the fauna, just the incredible Coorong, Murray Mouth, incredible part of South Australia with so much history, and so that inspired me to make those quilts.
And that's the 2 black and white ones.
Yeah, the 2 black
Kathy
and white
took some
ones.
photos of.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Oh, look, I'm so glad we hung around.
So am I. It's lovely to see you.
Because this has been a wonderful postscript. So again, thank you so much for contributing to our oral history.
Thanks for coming.